We're going to learn from the moon. We just had a beautiful Sharad Purnim a few days ago. And the lesson from the moon will be in relationship to a very basic principle in the yoga system, whether it's Bhakti Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Very foundational principle, which is we are not this body. Or as Raghunath Prabhu, our good yogi friend, says during class, he'll say to the students, you're not the body, you're not the mind, but you're something divine. While people are doing yoga asanas. You're not the body, you're not the mind, but you're something divine. So this is a very elementary verse that we learn from Bhagavad Gita, that we're not this body, right? But we're the soul within, we're the unit of consciousness. So the moon, Krsna, in the expression of his moon, Sashi Suryayo, will teach us how to understand the differentiation between the body and the soul. So we'll recite some Mangalacharan mantras, and then from there we'll read this beautiful selection from Light of the Bhagavad. And for those who know the Mangalacharan mantras, you can recite along, and you might have a little flute in the background from our expert flute player, Mike. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavamsta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. One more time we'll say it together, it's on the left side of the room. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll say this one mantra once and then you can repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So if anyone saw the full moon, did anyone have darshan of the Shard Purnim the other day? Beautiful full moon on the eastern horizon. This is one of the most important, beautiful nights of the year. It's part of the Maha Rasa Lila, Shard Purnim, and then there's a Vasant Rasa Lila in the spring. So this moon in the fall is referring to the Shard Purnim that we just had a few days ago. And before we start, we can invite everyone to practice this tapasya. Tapasya means austerity. Like for example, some people may fast, or there's yogis who observe celibacy for thousands of years, or people sit in one place under a tree, just living on prana, on their prana vayu. So very severe austerities. There's even a more difficult one. Is not looking at a cell phone for 20 minutes. I would say that might be just as comparable as sitting in a ring of fire or bathing up in the freezing cold water of the Rockies. It might just be as difficult. So this is a tapasya we challenge you all with, that for the next 20 to 25 minutes, that your eyes don't go to the cell phone. Only exception is if you're a doctor or a parent and you have an emergency that you have to attend to. And if it's super urgent and you can't hold yourself back, then you can sit out on the front lawn and look at your screen. But I would welcome you to practice this tapasya. And like I said, by doing that, you can experience what the yogis experience up in the Himalayas, sitting in ice cold water or in a ring of fire. I would say it's probably equal. Am I right or am I right? Especially when the cell phone is next to you, right? It's within arm's reach, almost impossible to not go for it. So it's a tapasya. At night, by the grace of the moonlight, the clouds in the sky can be seen moving. So whenever you were a young kid, going out to dinner with your parents, I remember this fondly. In my dad's good old school Lincoln Continental car, the giant tanks back in the 70s. We'd go out to dinner, and on the way home, I'd see like the moon's following us. Anyone had that phenomena? Yeah, remember that? Going out to dinner with your folks, and on your way home, you'd be like looking at the moon and closing one eye and opening the other, and it's like, wait, are the clouds moving? Is the moon moving? What's going on? So Krishna is giving us the philosophy of children observing the moon movement. At night, by the grace of the moonlight, the clouds in the sky can be seen moving, yet the moon itself also appears to be moving, just as a living being appears to be moving because of false identification with matter. So today we'll recognize the moon as Sri Guru, right? Spiritual master comes in so many different ways. Krishna manifests himself in so many different ways. So today we can appreciate the moon as our guru. At night, in the rainy season, the moving clouds reflecting the moonlight make the moon appear to be moving. This is called illusion. The spirit soul, or the living being, is the root of all activities of the material body. But because of illusion, the spirit soul remains covered by the gross and subtle material bodies. Thus covered, the conditioned soul identifies with the material body and becomes subject to the sense of false ego. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vidudatma kartaham itu manyate. Viduatma, sometimes it's referred to as a fool or kind of like ass-like consciousness. The bewildered soul, thinking oneself to be the body, they think themselves to be the doer, when in actuality everything's being carried out by the gunas or the ropes, the modes of nature. Right? We think we're the doer, but we're just kind of like puppets. And there's different modes kind of pulling the strings and we're sort of moving. So we want to be connected to the ultimate puppeteer, to Krishna, versus being shackled by the modes of nature. So the spirit soul is free, but yet identifying with the body, we're in a conditioned state, and we become subject to the sense of false ego. This false ego obliges the living being to consider his material body to be his self, the offspring of the body to be his children. and the land of birth of the body to be an object of worship. I am American, I am Canadian, I am European, I am African, I am Australian, I am Antarctican, I am South American, and within those countries, right? Bolivian, Argentinian, Russian, Yugoslavian, Ukrainian, Algerian, South America, the list goes on, countries and countries and countries and countries. So-called United Nations, more like divided nations. They're trying to experience this United Nations, but it just becomes more divided. So we worship the land of birth, and then what to say of just the offspring, I and mine, everything is mine. So Prabhupada's saying, with that sense of false ego, what's the result of that? These things, the land that we're born in, we think that's us, the body to be the self, male, female, black, white, brown, yellow, pink, green, whatever, tall, short, big, small, eastern, western, northern, southern. We identify with the body, the offspring of the body to be his children, and the land of birth of the body to be an object of worship. Thus, the living being's conception of nationalism is another type of ignorance. Because of ignorance, a living being identifies himself with the land of his birth and moves, this is a really poetic expression Prabhupada gives here, and moves with the misconceptions of national ideas. In fact, however, a living being does not belong to any nation or species of life. He has nothing to do with the body, as the moon has nothing to do with the moving clouds. If we only had a leader, well, we do, Srila Prabhupada and the great acharyas. You can imagine if we had a leader of a country giving their speech based on this. It would be so revolutionary. The moon is far away from the clouds and is fixed in its own orbit. But illusion, so here's what we experienced when we were kids, but illusion presents a scene in which the moon appears to be moving. A living being should not float. So this is this one you can write down, or you can get the book from Mother Nidra. This one is worth memorizing, what Srila Prabhupada writes here. So poetic. A living being should not float with the misconceptions of the temporary body. He must always know himself to be transcendental to the bodily identity. This is the path of knowledge, and complete knowledge fixes the living being in the orbit of spiritual activities. You know when people say that's word? I think amongst the younger generation, they'll give a fist bump and they'll say, word. This is the ultimate word. If you're going to say word to someone, just give them this line here. A living being should not float with the misconception, so float. A living being should not float with the misconception of the temporary body. He must always know himself to be transcendental to the bodily identity. This is the path of knowledge, and complete knowledge fixes the living being in the orbit of spiritual activities. Is that word? The spiritual living force is always active by nature. By illusion, his activities are wrongly directed in relation with the body. So just like right now, it's very hyped up, right? Democrat, Republican, Eastern, Western, this country, that country, all the dozens of wars going on, so much conflict. Why? All based on identification of this body. It's so elementary, but we have to regularly repeat it, because even as practitioners of yoga, of bhakti, or any form of spiritual discipline, it's still very easily get influenced. The current, the atmosphere today, we can't necessarily visually see it, but you can feel it. The current is so thick with the bodily identification that it's difficult to not get swept away in that current, even as a practitioner. It's challenging to not get touched by these dualistic conceptions, to stay aloof in our transcendental orbit. It's very, very challenging, especially in Kali Yuga, because everything from advertisement to social media to social interactions to athletics to music to politics, everything is so much emphasis on the bodily concept and designations. And to be able to move like Aikido, right? Like a good Aikido fighter in martial arts, to be able to have forces come to you and just not have to, get clashed or knocked down by it, but be able to move gracefully and be like water, to move gracefully amidst all these conflicting elements of duality that bind us to the bodily concept. So the spiritual living force is always active by nature. By illusion, his activities are wrongly directed in relation with the body, but in the liberated condition of complete knowledge, his activities are conducted in spiritual devotion. So this is bhakti. In a lot of yoga systems, the idea is to come to nirvana, tyag, renunciation, nothingness, no action, no mind. So if I were to all ask you to sit in Gyan Mudra now, and don't think of a purple elephant with white stripes. You sit in your dhyan, your meditation, and don't think of a purple elephant with white stripes. Very, very difficult, right? Because once I say that, that image is going to come to the mind. So just coming to like no mind, very difficult. Now on the path of bhakti, nirvana is automatically attained because one engages in Brahma Nirvana, in the transcendental positive activities of Brahman or spirit. Krishna describes that nicely in the 5th chapter, Karma Yoga. So knowledge of his activities are conducted in spiritual devotion. Liberation does not mean stopping activities. It means being purified of illusory activities and becoming transcendental to relations with the gross and subtle bodies. Very nice point here. Liberation does not mean stopping activities. It means being purified of illusory activities and becoming transcendental to relations with the gross and subtle bodies. So basically, if the United Nations or if people who are interested in unity and cooperation and coexisting together, we can print as many stickers and put them on our bumpers, but none of that will have effect until this principle is established. What Prabhupada said in these 4 paragraphs is pretty much the peace formula. First, understanding that if we're orbiting within this conception of the body, identifying with the land of our birth, with these bodies, with the offspring, with the things that are under our care, if we're identifying with that, then we become attached, and then we think we're either inferior or superior. We start comparing, competing, jealousy, envy, competition, aggression. Oh, my friend, enemy. And so Prahlad Maharaj, Hiranyakashipu's son, said, I'm not interested in this politics of friend and enemy and conquering and dividing. I see that all living entities are spirit soul. I'm a spirit soul. I'm connected to all living entities because we're all part and parcel of Krishna, right? Krishna is that source. We're all complete units. Om Purnam, Ada Purnam Idam, Purnat Purnam, Udachate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnam Eva Vishishyate. We're all completely perfect. We're all complete units. Why? Because we're coming from that supreme source. Om Purnam, Ada Purnam Idam. Everything coming from that complete whole is complete in itself and remains complete. And then in this life, when we come to that point of awakening, that, oh, I'm not just, 5'6", 120 pounds, and with brown skin, half Japanese, half Spanish, or I'm not, East Indian, West Indian, I'm not, Moroccan or Irish, English, Scandinavian, right? You can probably research your gene table, right? And it shows, you can send in a blood sample, and it can show like, okay, you're 90% this, or you're 60% this, 30% this, a little bit of indigenous mixed in, and you can go on and think that's who you are. But until we realize that actually all those coverings, whether it's the body, whether it's our affiliation with politics, whether it's our affiliation with counterculture, our age, whatever it might be, even our emotional condition, right? Krishna says in 14th chapter, praise and blame, success and failure, friend and enemy, happiness and distress, heat and cold, one who sees all that as the same is on the platform of transcendence. They're on that orbit of transcendence. But so long as we're orbiting within this duality, we're going to experience tension. Why? Because I'm this, whether it's the body, the land, and you're that. And so either I'm going to compete with you, or judge you, or dominate you, or conquer you. And basically it's what dogs do, without demeaning anyone as a valuable human being. Many of our leaders today are just 2 legs, not 4 legs, and they may not be barking like a dog, but if you walk by some places, a dog will start barking because they're on one side, and if you go in there, they're going to bark and maybe even bite you, right? So it's a very kind of elementary, territorial, this very like fierce territorial mentality. So if we apply these principles, then we can start to experience unity and even a sense of relief right? There's so much pressure today of like, how do I look? What's my voice sound like? What's my hair sound like? What's my body look like? Right? There's so much pressure on just the physical platform. What's my economic status? What's my political affiliation? What's my religious affiliation? What's my role within the family, society, world at large? And so much of that pressure, that anxiety, the worries, the stress comes because I have identification with the body. So a very elementary ABC of the path of yoga in bhakti is this very simple principle that Krishna teaches. Dehino, smin, for those who know it, yata dehe, komaram yavanam jara, yata dehantara pratir, dira satara namuyati. That we're changing these bodies, but I'm the soul. And then once we come to that platform of I'm a soul, do I just kind of enter into a nothingness? Do I become inactive? I still need to do the dishes at home, wash clothes, clean the room, go to work, drive the car, change the diapers, brush my teeth. I'm still engaging in a lot of activities, so then, is that all material? And then when I get a few moments of the day, then I get a little moment maybe of just awareness of the soul? No. What Prabhupada's closing off here, he's saying liberation, that feeling that yogis are feeling, that liberation, that Brahmananda, liberation does not mean stopping activities. So we think, I got to stop working. I'm going to stop all material activities. It's all duality, it's all illusion. It doesn't mean stopping activities. It means being purified of illusory activities, meaning that all those things that we thought we were, those superficial, illusory bodily designations, when we're purified of those illusory activities, and then becoming transcendental to relations with the gross and subtle bodies. So then the sense of family really expands, more than just immediate family. Just like the other day, I went to drop my daughter off and took my son skateboarding to this one skate park. And there was like thousands of roly-polies in the skate bowl, like thousands of them. And my son got to the top of the ramp, and he was about to drop in, and he says, "We can't skate, Dad. All these roly-polies will get crushed. They'll get crushed, and it'll just be like a massacre." So then we got the leaf blower, and we had a dustpan, and there was another guy there, and he was like, "That's pretty cool. You guys aren't going to go in the bowl because of the roly-polies?" So these are just like little bugs. But even just an 11-year-old kid just saw that, hey, those are souls. Those are Krishna's creatures. We can't run over them inattentively, right? Sometimes we might step on a bug. So we spent about half an hour with a dustpan, a leaf blower, and a little broom, and we swept out all the roly-polies because they fall in and they can't climb back out because it's too steep. So we swept them up, put them out, and then had fun skating. So when we come to this platform of going beyond just the connection with the greater environment, and what's the expression of the perfect yogi? Is it the person who can levitate? Is it the person who can wrap their head around their legs and stand on one leg for 1,000 years? Krishna doesn't say any of that in Bhagavad Gita. He says the perfect yogi is one who, in comparison to oneself, sees the true equality of all beings in their happiness and distress. The perfect yogi, in comparison to oneself. If you're going to do any comparison, do it on this platform, which won't produce envy. It'll actually produce empathy and compassion. If we compare on the external platform, competition and superiority, inferiority will develop. But what Krishna says is the perfect yogi, in comparison to oneself, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. This is the perfection of yoga, and that can come when one is purified of this mentality that I'm just this body and I'm in relationship to the land and those things connected to my body. But ultimately, one who can see the equality of all beings. So I'm on step one on this path. I still very much get influenced by duality, and it's a constant practice, right? And what's the nourishment? What's the watering process so we can stay in the orbit of transcendence? A simple process. If you want to go to the Himalayas and you want to sit in sub-zero water and do pranayam and kapalabhati and vastrika and kumbhaka and hold your breath, or if you want to sit in a ring of fire and come to that point of discipline, you're welcome to. Maybe one or two of you might be able to do it for a few seconds, but I don't think any of us have the endurance to do any of those austerities for a prolonged amount of time. But there is one simple practice, and it takes a little austerity, is the simple chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. In this day and age, the recommended practice of yoga is mantra meditation. And by sincerely and attentive practicing this, one can tap into this orbit. How does Prabhupada say it again? This is a path of knowledge, and complete knowledge fixes a living being in the orbit of spiritual activities. So by this activity of chanting Hare Krishna, then when you're sweeping, just like every morning, Brandon comes here, he sweeps the whole temple room, the stairway, takes all the trash out downstairs, right? It looks just like chores, right? Or someone else is making gardens, or Meenakshi and probably Mindy and Nanu and a few others. They're taking little cotton balls and they're rolling them into ghee wicks. And it just looks like a little simple chore, but yet those ghee wicks will be offered to Krishna, or this nice swept floor will be supporting the Sangha that comes together for Kirtan, right? So then all the activities start to become purified. Even washing dishes, going for a walk. You go for a walk and you see the trees and you see, wow, Krishna is a beautiful artist. So all activities can be transformed and purified in relationship to Krishna, just by this simple process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So thank you very much, and we give our gratitude to our Guru for the day, Chandra, the moon. We can learn from the elements. The spiritual master comes in so many different forms. So when you see the moon tonight, and if you're driving around and you're seeing that moon moving with the clouds, you can reflect on this beautiful lesson that we learned from the light of the Bhagavad. So thank you very much. Keep the vibration going. Keep this mantra growing. Keep the spirits uplifted internally and for the world at large. And on that note, we'll invite Divya Kishori. I just saw her somewhere. But she'll lead us in Kirtan for about 15 minutes or so. And then if our regular volunteers can give the cue downstairs to bring up prasadam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai! Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai!